Theories of Human Development. Welcome viewers. Today let us look into the topic Theories of Human Development, Related Concepts and Issues. The study of human development is a rich and interesting subject. We all have personal experiences, but sometimes it is difficult to understand how and why people grow, learn and act as they do. Let me give you an example. 4-year-old Divya is keen to dress herself up every morning, but lo, she regularly wears her shoes on the wrong feet, misses buttons and puts shirts on inside out. When her mother tries to help her, Divya refuses and screams, "No, let me do it." Sure, we've all come across incidents like this and been in trouble because many times it is not possible for us to come up with the right solution to such situations. Why does Divya behave in this way? Does her behavior relate to her age, family relationships, or is it an individual temperament? Developmental psychologists try to answer such questions. Developmental psychology seeks to understand, explain and predict behaviors that occur throughout a person's lifespan from conception to death. The scientific study of human development seeks to understand and explain how and why people change throughout their lives. This includes all aspects of human growth: the physical, emotional, intellectual, social, perceptual and personality development. This field is broad based and examines a range of topics such as motor skills, cognitive development, executive functions, moral understanding, language acquisition, social change, personality, emotional development, self-concept and identity formation. It also looks into the influences of nature and nurture on the process of human development and of its periodical changes. Developmental psychology is concerned with a number of fields such as educational psychology, child psychopathology, forensic developmental psychology, child development, cognitive psychology, ecological psychology and cultural psychology. The well-known developmental psychologists of the 20th century are John Bowlby, Urie Bronfenbrenner, Erik Erikson, Sigmund Freud, Jean Piaget, Lawrence Kohlberg, Lev Vygotsky and many others. The theories forwarded by them are John Bowlby, attachment theory; Urie Bronfenbrenner, ecological systems theory; Erik Erikson, psychosocial development; Sigmund Freud, psychosexual development; Lawrence Kohlberg, moral development; Jean Piaget, cognitive development; Lev Vygotsky, cultural historical psychology development. Of these, Sigmund Freud's concepts have had a significant impact on the perceptions of the public. Now, let us look at some famous theories of human development. Psychoanalytic child development theories. John Bowlby believed that mental health and behavioral problems could be attributed to early childhood. His attachment theory suggests that children come into the world biologically pre-programmed to form attachment with others, as it will help their survival. He also said that the fear of strangers represents an important survival mechanism built in by nature. Babies display certain innate behaviors called social releasers like crying, smiling, crawling. Such actions ensure proximity and contact with the mother or attachment figure and stimulate caregiving from the adults. The fact that determines attachment is not food, but care and responsiveness. The attachment figure is the safe base for exploring the world. This acts as the case in point to all future relationships. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, a Russian-born American developmental psychologist, is known for his ecological systems theory of child development. Ecological systems theory specifies 4 types of nested environmental systems: the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem and macrosystem. Each system contains roles, norms and rules that initiate strong development. Microsystem, the direct environment in our lives such as our home and school. Mesosystem, the relationships that connect to the microsystem. Exosystem, the larger social system. The child plays no role. Macrosystem refers to the cultural values, customs and laws of society. This conceptualization of development from the family to economic and political structures is viewed as part of the life course from childhood to adulthood. Sigmund Freud, the Austrian neurologist, is best known for developing the theories and techniques of psychoanalysis. The theories proposed by Sigmund Freud stress the importance of childhood events and experiences, libido and ego. They exclusively focus on mental disorders rather than normal functioning. Freud believes that we all have conscious, preconscious and unconscious levels. The conscious level makes us aware of our mental process. The preconscious involves information that, though not available now, can be brought into consciousness. The unconscious includes mental processes we are unaware of. To explain this, he has developed 3 personality structures: the id, ego and superego. The id, the most primitive of the 3, is the aspect of personality that is driven by internal and basic drives and needs, which are typically instinctual, such as hunger, thirst and the drive for sex or libido. The id is the completely unconscious, impulsive, childlike portion of the psyche that acts in accordance with the pleasure principle. It seeks immediate pleasure and gratification and avoids pain. The ego is rational and works to balance both the id and superego and mediates between the desires of the id and the superego. It helps to separate what is real and the reality of our drives. At the same time, it is also realistic about the standards set by the superego. It tries to strike stability between the impractical pleasure principle of the id and the equally impractical moralism of the superego. It is a part of the psyche that is usually reflected most directly in a person's actions. The superego, the moral component, is driven by morality principle. It acts in connection with the morality of higher thought and action. The superego plays the critical and moralizing role. Instead of instinctually acting like the id, the superego works to act in socially acceptable ways. It employs morality, judging our sense of wrong and right and using guilt to encourage socially acceptable behavior. We can call this conscience. Freud's concept is usually represented by the iceberg model. This model represents roles the id, ego and superego play in relation to conscious and unconscious thought. Freud compares the relationship between the ego and the id to that between a charioteer and his horses. The horses provide the energy and drive, while the charioteer provides direction. Freud describes child development as a series of psychosexual stages. In 3 essays on sexuality, Freud outlines these stages as oral, anal, phallic, latency and genital. Each stage involves the satisfaction of a libidinal desire and can later play a role in adult personality. If a child does not successfully complete a stage, Freud suggests that he or she would develop a fixation which would later influence adult personality and behavior. According to Sigmund Freud, personality is mostly established by the age of 5. Early experiences play a large role in personality development and continue to influence behavior in later life. Psychosocial development. Erich Homburger Erikson, a German-born American developmental psychologist, is known for his theory on psychosocial development. He is most famous for coining the phrase identity crisis. Whereas Freud is an id psychologist, Erikson is an ego psychologist. He emphasizes the role of culture and society and the conflict that can take place within the ego itself, whereas Freud underscores the conflict between the id and the superego. Erikson affirms that as the ego develops, it successfully resolves crises which are distinctly social in nature. This involves establishing a sense of trust in others, in developing a sense of identity in society, and in helping the next generation prepare for the future. Erikson enlarges on the Freudian thoughts by focusing on the adaptive and creative characteristic of the ego. He expands the notion of the stages of personality development and includes the entire lifespan. Erikson's theory claims that the humans develop throughout their lifespan, and this development consists of 8 stages which occur in different periods. Trust versus mistrust during infancy, autonomy versus shame and doubt during early childhood, initiative versus guilt during play age, industry versus inferiority during school age, identity versus role confusion during adolescence, intimacy versus isolation during young adulthood, generativity versus stagnation during adulthood, integrity versus despair occurs in old age. Each of these stages has a positive as well as a negative crisis. Each stage builds upon the successful completion of earlier stages. The challenges of stages not successfully completed may reappear as problems in the future. Erikson believes that each stage of development is focused on overcoming a conflict. The crises are of a psychosocial nature because they involve psychological needs of the individual conflicting with the needs of the society. For instance, the primary conflict during the adolescent period involves establishing a sense of personal identity. This results in role confusion. According to Erikson's theory, successful completion of each stage results in a healthy personality and acquiring of basic virtues. Basic virtues are characteristic strengths which the ego can use to resolve subsequent crises. Erikson was greatly inspired by father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, and his non-violence movement. His book, Gandhi's Truth on the Origins of Militant Non-Violence, won the Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction and the US National Book Award in the category Philosophy and Religion. Cognitive development. Cognitive development is a field of study in neuroscience and psychology. It focuses on a child's development in terms of information processing, conceptual resources, perceptual skill, language learning, and other aspects of brain development. It is cognitive psychology compared to an adult's point of view. Cognitive development is the emergence of the ability to think and understand. Cognitive theory is concerned with the development of a person's thought process. It looks at how these thought processes influence the way we understand and interact with the world. Jean Piaget is considered as the foremost cognitive thinker. He proposed an idea that helped to revolutionize how we think about child development. He was puzzled why children gave wrong answers to the questions that required logical thinking. He believed that these incorrect answers revealed important differences between the thinking of adults and children. Children think differently than adults. According to Piaget, children are born with a basic mental structure, genetically inherited and evolved, on which all subsequent learning and knowledge are based. Piaget has proposed a theory of cognitive development to account for the steps and sequence of children's intellectual development. He believed that people move through stages of development that allow them to think in new and more complex ways. Piaget's stage theory describes the cognitive development of children. Cognitive development involves changes in cognitive processes and abilities. In his view, cognitive development is a progressive reorganization of mental processes as a result of biological maturation and environmental experience. Children construct understanding of the world around them, then experience discrepancies between what they already know and what they discover in their environment. There are three basic key components to Piaget's cognitive theory. 1. Schemas, the building blocks of knowledge. 2. Adaptation processes, equilibrium, assimilation and accommodation. 3. Stages of development, sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, formal operational. Schemas. Piaget called the schema the basic building block of intelligent behavior, a way of organizing knowledge. It is useful to think of schemas as units of knowledge. Each one relates to one aspect of the world, including objects, actions and abstract concepts. In Piaget's view, a schema includes both a category of knowledge and the process of obtaining that knowledge. As experiences happen, this new information is used to modify, add to or change previously existing schemas. Jean Piaget views intellectual growth as a process of adaptation or adjustment to the world. Adaptation processes, equilibrium, assimilation and accommodation. Equilibrium or a state of cognitive balance is when a child's existing schemas are capable of explaining what it can perceive around it. For example, a child may have a schema about a type of animal such as a dog. If the child's sole experience has been with small dogs, a child might believe that all dogs are small, furry and have 4 legs. Assimilation is using an existing schema to deal with a new object or situation. In case the child encounters a very large dog, the child takes in this new information, modifies the previously existing schema to include this new information. The process of taking in new information into our previously existing schemas is known as assimilation. Accommodation happens when the existing schema or knowledge does not work and needs to be changed to deal with a new object or situation. Accommodation involves altering existing schemas or ideas as a result of new information or new experiences. New schemas may also be developed during this process. The process is subjective because we tend to modify experience or information to fit in with our pre-existing beliefs. Stages of development. The sensory motor period, birth to 2 years. During this time, Piaget says that a child's cognitive system is limited to motor reflexes at birth. The child builds on these reflexes to develop more sophisticated procedures. The pre-operational period, 2 to 6 or 7 years. At this age, children acquire representational skills in mental imagery and language acquisition. They are very self-oriented and view the world from their own perspective. The concrete operational period, 6 to 7 to 11 to 12 years. Children in this stage are able to take another's point of view and take into account more than one perspective simultaneously. Piaget views that they cannot yet perform on abstract problems and cannot consider logical outcomes. The formal operational period, 11 to 12 years to adulthood. Children who attain the formal operation stage are capable of thinking logically and abstractly. Piaget considers this the ultimate stage of development. You must have now understood the basic concepts of Piaget's theory. Where can we use this most important theory? Parents can use it as a positive tool to nurture their child's growth. Teachers must apply it for academic exercises. For example, while discussing the suitability of syllabus subject for the different students' level in the classroom training of the students and their evaluation. Cognitive social development. Lev Vygotsky. The Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky brought out a learning theory that has become very famous, especially in the field of education. Vygotsky's main work is in developmental psychology. He has proposed a theory of the development of higher cognitive functions in children. He believes that reasoning power in children emerges through practical activity in a social environment. During the earlier period of his career, he argued that the development of reasoning was mediated by signs and symbols and therefore dependent on cultural practices and language as well as on universal cognitive process. Vygotsky's ideas have grown increasingly influential in areas including child development, cognitive psychology and education. Vygotsky introduced the notion of zone of proximal development, an innovative metaphor capable of describing the potential of human cognitive development. His work covered different areas such as the origin and psychology of art, development of higher mental functions, philosophy of science and methodology of psychological research, the relation between learning and human development, concept formation, interrelation between language and thought development, play as a psychological phenomenon, learning disabilities and abnormal human development. Vygotsky views every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level, first between people, interpsychological, and then inside the child, intrapsychological. Like Piaget, Vygotsky also believes that children learn actively and through hands-on experiences. His socio-cultural theory suggests that parents, caregivers, peers and the culture at large are responsible for the development of higher order functions. This applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory and to the formation of concepts. All the higher functions originate as actual relationships between individuals. Socio-cultural theory focuses not only on how adults and peers influence individual learning, but also on how cultural beliefs and attitudes impact and how instruction and learning take place. Vygotsky has introduced an important concept in socio-cultural theory, the zone of proximal development, ZPD. It denotes the range of tasks that a child has to complete while in the process of learning. The lower limit of ZPD is the child's level of skill reached, working independently. It is as the child's actual development level. The upper limit is the child's level of potential skill it can reach with the assistance of a capable instructor. Essentially, it includes all of the knowledge and skills that a person cannot yet understand or perform on his or her own, but is capable of learning with guidance. Now, examine this. Little Ramu is playing with shapes toys. He cannot figure out how to fit the shapes to their designated holes. Ramu's dad shows him how each shape fits into its required hole. Ramu initially makes mistakes, but soon learns it properly. Dad leaves him now to complete the task. According to Vygotsky, the zone of proximal development is the distance between the actual development level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. The concept of the ZPD is widely used to study children's mental development as it relates to education. It is seen as a scaffolding, a structure of support points for performing an action. Scaffolding is a process through which a teacher or a more competent peer helps the student in his or her ZPD as necessary and withdraws this help when it becomes unnecessary, like a scaffold that is removed from a building after construction is completed. To have an effective scaffolding, one must start at the child's level of knowledge and build from there. Scaffolding is a key feature of effective teaching and can include modeling a skill, providing hints or cues, and adapting material or activity. In the classroom, scaffolding can be performed with just about any task. Vygotsky theory promotes learning contexts in which students play an active role in learning, in contrast to the traditional teaching method, transmitting information to students. A contemporary application of Vygotsky's theory is reciprocal teaching, used to improve students' ability to learn from text. In this method, teacher and students collaborate in learning and practicing 4 key skills: summarizing, questioning, clarifying, and predicting. The teacher's role in the process is reduced over time. The roles of the teacher and student are therefore shifted, as a teacher should collaborate with his or her students in order to facilitate meaning construction in students. Learning therefore becomes a reciprocal experience for the students and teacher. Behavioral development. Behaviorism is the theoretical perspective in which learning and behavior are described and explained in terms of stimulus-response relationship. The key assumptions of behaviorist theory are: the environment influences behavior. People's behaviors are a result of their interaction with the environment. They become conditioned to respond to certain ways based on responses like feedback, praise, and rewards. Learning is described through stimuli and responses. Behaviorists focus on observable events rather than people's thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. Learning must involve a behavioral change. Learning does not occur unless there is an observable change in behavior. Learning must result when stimulus and response occur close together in time. Learners must associate their response with a stimulus. These two must happen in conjunction with each other. Animals and humans learn in similar ways. Behaviorists conducted their experiments using animals because they believed the study of animals could explain human learning behavior. Behavioral child development theories deal only with observable behaviors. Here, development is considered a reaction to rewards, punishments, stimuli, and reinforcement. The major behaviorists you should know are John Watson, known as the father of behaviorism; Ivan Pavlov, best known for classical conditioning; B. F. Skinner, famous for operant conditioning; and Edward Thorndike, well known for the law of effect. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov was a Russian physiologist known primarily for his work in classical conditioning. While at the Institute of Experimental Medicine, Ivan Petrovich Pavlov carried out his classical experiments on digestive glands. Pavlov investigated the gastric function of dogs and later of children by collecting, measuring and analyzing the saliva and its response to food under different conditions. Pavlov's dogs, restrained in an experimental chamber, were presented with meat powder and their saliva was collected. He noticed that the dogs tended to salivate before food was actually delivered to their mouths. He set out to investigate the psychic secretion, as he called it. Over time, he noticed that salivation of dogs happened merely by the presence of the handler or by a clicking noise produced by the device that distributed the meat powder. Surprised by this finding, Pavlov paired the meat powder with various stimuli such as the ringing of a bell. After the meat powder and bell, auditory stimulus were presented together several times. The bell was used alone. Pavlov's dogs responded by salivating to the sound of the bell without the food. The bell was able to acquire the ability to trigger the salivation response. Pavlov regards the meat powder an unconditioned stimulus UCS and the dog's salivation as the unconditioned response UCR. The bell is a neutral stimulus until the dog learns to associate the bell with food. Then the bell becomes a conditioned stimulus CS, which produces the conditioned responses CR of salivation after repeated pairings between the bell and food. Classical conditioning involves learning to associate an unconditioned stimulus that already brings about a particular response or a reflex with a new conditioned stimulus, so that the new stimulus brings about the same response. Classical conditioning is classical since it is the first systematic study of basic laws of learning or conditioning. Classical conditioning focuses on using preceding conditions to alter behavioral reactions. The principles of classical conditioning have influenced preventative antecedent control strategies used in the classroom. Buris Frederick Skinner, commonly known as B.F. Skinner, is an American psychologist, behaviorist, author, inventor and social philosopher. Skinner considers free will an illusion. He believes that human action is dependent on consequences of previous actions. If the consequences are bad, there is a chance that the action will not be repeated. If the consequences are good, however, the actions that led to it will be more convincing. Skinner called this the principle of reinforcement. Skinner is regarded as the father of operant conditioning. His work was based on Edward Thorndike's law of effect. Thorndike studied learning in animals using a puzzle box. Skinner introduced a new term into the law of effect, reinforcement. Behavior which is reinforced tends to be repeated, gets strengthened. Behavior which is not reinforced tends to die out or weakened. Skinner studied operant conditioning by conducting experiments using animals which he placed in a Skinner box, similar to Thorndike's puzzle box. He coined the term operant conditioning. It means roughly changing of behavior by using reinforcement given after the desired response. Skinner identifies three types of responses or operants that can follow behavior. Neutral operants, responses from the environment that neither increase nor decrease the probability of a behavior being repeated. Reinforcers, responses from the environment that increase the probability of a behavior being repeated. They can be either positive or negative. Punishers, response from the environment that decrease the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. Punishment weakens behavior. Sometimes our own behavior is affected by either reinforcement or punishment. As a child, you probably tried out a number of behaviors and learnt from their consequences. The simple way to shape behavior is to provide feedback on learner performance. For example, through compliments, approval, encouragement and affirmation such as saying very good, well done, can certainly do very well, rightly presented and so on. Social development. Albert Bandura, Social Cognitive Theory (SCT) is used in psychology, education and communication. It holds that a portion of an individual's knowledge acquisition can be directly related to observing others within the context of social interactions, experiences and outside media influences. In other words, the survival of humanity is dependent upon copying the actions of others. SCT is the result of the work done by Neil E. Miller and John Dollard in 1941. They identified 4 key factors in learning new behavior. 1. Drives, 2. Cues, 3. Responses and 4. Rewards. According to Bandura's theory of child development, children learn new behaviors from observing other people. There are 5 core concepts associated with the SCT framework. 1. Observational learning modeling. 2. Outcome expectations. 3. Self-efficacy. 4. Goal setting. And 5. Self-regulation. Depending on whether people are rewarded or punished for their behavior and the outcome of the behavior, that behavior may become a model. Self-efficacy is believing in yourself to perform action. It is the belief in one's capabilities to organize and execute the courses of action required to manage prospective situations. The best example is Ekalavya, the hunter boy in the Mahabharata, whose observational learning and self-efficacy make him an efficient archer. Bandura, along with his students and colleagues, conducted a series of studies known as the Bobo doll experiment to find out why and when children display aggressive behaviors. These studies demonstrated the value of modeling for acquiring novel behaviors. Unlike behavioral theories, Bandura believes that external reinforcement is not the only way that people learn new things. Instead, intrinsic reinforcements such as a sense of pride, satisfaction and accomplishment could also lead to learning. By observing the actions of others, including parents and peers, children develop new skills and acquire new information. Social cognitive theory has been applied to many areas of human functioning, such as career choice and organizational behavior, as well as in understanding classroom motivation, learning and achievement. Issues in theories of human development. So far, we have looked at the major theories of human development and how they have been adapted in the field of education. Now, let us consider some of the issues in these theories seen by the psychologists. Nature versus nurture. The debate over the relative importance of heredity and the environment is one of the oldest issues in philosophy and psychology. Philosophers like Plato and Descartes supported the idea that some ideas are inborn. On the other hand, thinkers like John Locke argued for the concept of tabula rasa, a belief that the mind is a blank slate at birth, with experience determining our knowledge. Today, most psychologists believe that it is an interaction between these two forces that cause development. Some aspects of the development are distinctly biological, such as puberty. However, The onset of puberty can be affected by environmental factors like diet and nutrition. Early experience versus later experience. The second vital consideration involves the relative importance of early experiences versus those that occur later in life. Have you wondered about this? Are we more affected by events that occur in early childhood, or do later events play an equally important role? Psychoanalytic theorists tend to focus upon events that occur in early childhood. According to Freud, much of a child's personality is completely established by the age of 5. If this is indeed the case, those who have gone through deprived or abusive childhoods might never adjust or develop normally. In contrast to this view, researchers believe that the influence of childhood events need not necessarily have a dominating effect over behavior throughout the life. Many people with less than perfect childhoods go on to develop normally into well adjusted adults. The classic example is Mahabharata's Karna, ill fated to suffer abuse, but turns out to be a great warrior because of positive reinforcement. Continuity versus discontinuity. The third major issue is between continuity and discontinuity. Do the changes happen smoothly over time or through a series of predetermined steps? Some theories of development argue that changes are simply a matter of quantity. Children display more of certain skills as they grow older. Other theories outline a series of sequential stages in which skills emerge at certain points of growth. So, remember, as you study these theories of human development, understand that they are only suggestions on some ways of child and human development. We still have unresolved issues in these theories. That is why the research and studies in this field continue to expand, because no two human beings are the same at any time, either in behavior or in cognition. So, to conclude, human development is a developing field of study in education. Various investigations using different approaches and research frameworks have proved collaborative learning to be effective in many kinds of settings and contexts. Teachers should assign tasks that students cannot do on their own, but which they can do with assistance. They should provide just enough assistance so that students learn to complete the tasks independently. They must then provide an environment enabling the students to do harder tasks than would otherwise be possible. In the context of adults, peers should challenge each other in order to support collaboration and success. In the process of child development, the adults and peers have greater responsibilities. Their cognitive growth is also simultaneous. The educators and the general public should become aware of the different aspects of human development that leads to designing and improving the education system. Such a thinking makes a person continue education throughout his or her life and achieve the maximum potential in his or her lifetime. Just as our great Guru Dr. S. Radhakrishnan affirms, learning is endless.